February 16th, 2026. Chapter 16, Path Factors of Wisdom of Samadhi, right view, and Samma Sankappa, right thought. 16.2d, Samadhi, right view, in the context of spiritual study. Page 1550 to page 1563. Buddha Dhamma. Now I read yesterday it's in chapter 8, but that's edited by Bruce Evans. Here is the original Buddha Dhamma compiled, and this is in chapter 16, 16.2d, right view in the context of spiritual study, Samadhi. Some beginning spiritual practitioners who possess a degree of Samadhi may believe in keeping with the threefold training, Titso Sika. The starting point of spiritual practice is moral conduct, Sila. That spiritual development begins with good behavior, Sucharita. The term Sucharita here refers to virtuous physical acts of speech and livelihood. It does not include Mano Suchariya, virtuous mental acts, which encompasses right view. This claim, however, misses the core of spiritual practice. The real purpose of spiritual practice at the level of morality or of conforming a wholesome disposition and creating wholesome habits is to enable people who are responsive to training to recognize the true value of sila, moral conduct. This is an example of how an individual behavior can shape values in the same way as external social factors can shape values. Only when one develops a deep understanding of moral conduct, one develops samadhi, right view, will virtuous conduct be secure. In this case, values determines behavior. At this stage, one's spiritual practice may begin. In other words, the reason why the Titso Sika, the threefold training, begins with moral conduct is in order for it to nurture the path factors, starting with Samadhi, right view. When the path factors led by Samadhi arise in a person, he or she is said to have begun spiritual training. From this point on, the path factors begin to perform their specific functions and to act in a coordinated way. Besides securing moral conduct sila, Samadhi, right view, leads to sincerity and honesty. It generates and guarantees that one's behavior accords with the heart and objective of moral principles. One's conduct does not err into an adherence to rules and practices, by simply following blindly. Sila Bhatta Paramasa, or into gullibility. When one possesses samadhi, right view, one can trust in one's virtuous conduct. But if one lacks right view, such as self-confidence will be absent. From another angle, by focusing on the conditions for samadhi, one can say that spiritual practice begins with the ability to reflect wisely. By using or applying reason analysis, yo niso mana sikara. This is true because when there is wise reflection, samatiti naturally follows. Even on the level of moral conduct, when yo niso mana sikara helps to guide behavior, one's actions will be correct and performed for useful ends. In addition, one gains understanding, confidence, and joy. Take this for the example, the act of dressing oneself properly. Besides considering the value of covering oneself modestly and protecting oneself from the elements, wise reflection also assists in considering the benefits of others and society. One thinks, I would dress in a clean and tidy way for the well-being of the community or of society. I won't dress in a distasteful or offensive way. I will dress in a dignified and pleasing way to support wholesome mind states in those whom I meet and to make them feel at ease. On the contrary, if one thinks of boasting about one's elegance and social status, of showing off or intimidating, seducing or tricking others, this reveals a lack of wise reflection. The mind would then be dominated by unwholesome qualities. It will be constricted and unhappy, and the act of wearing clothes would be immodest and misguided. When people hear the word study, sutra, they usually think of the learning required for a specific profession or for earning a livelihood, which is the Buddhist principle practice in the matter of moral conduct, sila. Naturally, no righteous person would approve of a career education that gives no consideration to whether one's livelihood is right or wrong, but an education that aims only at establishing right livelihood without focusing on establishing samatiti, right view, is still not correct and is unlikely to fulfill one's wishes, even if it is to the extent of creating right livelihood, because it has not reached the heart of spiritual study. It may lead to right livelihood in name only, not true right livelihood, because it involves a training in moral conduct, sila, that does not generate the path factors. It is still superficial and perfunctory. It is not rooted in the Eightfold Path. The correct way to establish samatiti, right view, as a foundation for right livelihood, it is inadequate to keep moral precepts without having a love for morality, or to perform good deeds without seeing the true importance of virtue. Think of the seemingly implausible things that happen in societies in which there is a widespread of immoral conduct. Many people in such societies see any action that leads to success or wealth, despite it involving dishonesty, deception, and injury to others, as a sign of cleverness and skill. Although there is often material abundance in such society, there's also much evildoing and crime. In contrast, there are other societies which are relatively impoverished, but in which they have little crime. Some of the poor people in such society would rather beg for food than commit theft or other bad deeds, whereas beggars in dishonest society may act unscrupulously even while begging. In the context of formal teaching, the subject matter reveals the important relationship between the Eightfold Path and the Titso Sika, the threefold training. This is evident with two factors: samatiti, right view, and moral training, sila, the first factor in these two teachings respectively. In terms of the interrelationship between sila and samatiti, moral conduct and right view, when people live together peacefully and in a well-disciplined fashion, there's an absence of fear and distress. When one acts virtuously, the mind is untroubled, calm, and concentrated. When the mind is calm and bright, one's thinking is nimble. One discerns things clearly without biases, giving rise to understanding and wisdom. Wisdom's ability to discern the value of moral conduct, sila, is an expression of samatiti, right view. With samatiti and right view and right understanding, a person's thoughts, a person's speech, and a person's actions are naturally virtuous. As mentioned above, training in sila, moral conduct, is truly an aspect of spiritual practice only when it gives rise to samadhi, right view. At the least, when one gains a deep appreciation for moral conduct, one sees its values. There are two ways of training in moral conduct, sila, that bears fruit, and samadhi, right view. First, training in moral conduct, sila, relying on a routine behavior, and sattva, faith. This way emphasizes a code of discipline, vinaya, of setting up a framework to regulate behavior and establishing a specific system, say of a daily routine. In order to create good habits and a wholesome disposition, in addition, one develops sattva, faith, by having virtuous friends, kalara or teachers, to point out the benefits and blessings of doing good and following a moral code. Virtuous friends, kalara may also introduce one to honorable, successful, and happy persons. These may be friends and teachers themselves, to act as a model, as an example for the behavior. In this way, a deep appreciation of goodness, a love of moral discipline, and an enthusiasm for virtuous conduct is generated. Even if one does not have a teacher to point out the benefits of doing good or to act as an example, as a model, it is able to adhere to such moral code. Having its influence one's habits and dispositions, one sees the benefits of virtue. One will develop an interest into morality and apply reasoning in such a way that accords with virtuous behavior. When one goes beyond simply adhering to moral code or to moral constraints, one sees the value of virtuous conduct that reaches the state of samadhi, right view. One's spiritual practice truly begins. This is true despite of the fact that one's right view may still be weak and unstable. One's practice may contain a degree of attachment, naivety, and the adherence to rules and practices. The second method is training in sila, moral conduct, using reason analysis, wise reflection, yoniso manasikara. This way emphasizes a thorough understanding of the objectives for actions and for practice. One's practices with yoniso manasikara, wise reflection, or one applies yoniso manasikara, reason analysis, to guide and direct behavior, as described in the example of wearing clothes above. Here, a teacher helps by first pointing out a way of contemplating and understanding the purpose of specific actions. When it comes to practical application, however, the student or practitioners must use yoniso manasikara in each instances themselves. So each individual must apply sound analysis, wise reflection for themselves. As another example, the act of paying respects to a bhikkhu, a monk, or to an elder. The person paying respects may reflect on the wholesome and appropriate reason for such actions. Considering, for the example, I pay respects in order to train myself to be humble and to cooperate. I pay respects in order to honor good manners and for the well-being of the community. I pay respects as a sign of reverence for the Dharma, which embodies in this person. I pay respects to the person with thoughts of kindness and benevolence to help remind him to preserve virtuous and suitable qualities. Or I pay respects in order to practice the Dharma in the most beautiful and correct fashion. On the part of bhikkhus, or the elders or teachers who are the recipient of such gestures of respects, they reflect this is an occasion to take stock, whether I possess such virtuous qualities, making me worthy of such respect. I am in the position to offer advice and teachings to this person. Is he acting in this suitable way? I rejoice in the highly virtuous person's conduct. She loves the harmony of the community and venerates the Dhamma. I will follow these worldly conventions. I or do whatever of its benefit to the world. When one reflects wisely in such ways, one gains confidence in one's actions. And unwholesome qualities cease to dominate the mind. Those paying respects, for example, do not compare themselves to another, through an impure attachment to self-identity. For instance, by thinking, what does he possess to make him worthy of respect? I am better than him. Why pay respects? And the recipient of ordination need not become mistrustful, offended, or resentful, saying by thinking, why does this person not show me respect? Why does he not show respect in an agreeable way? Why he not get carried away by thinking, people come to bow and pay respect to me. I am so special, so excellent. The examples here describes yo niso manasikara, reason analysis that induces wholesome qualities that give rise to conscious mundane samadhi, right view. We can see, however, that this second way of training is more profound than the first way, as it's able to prevent the damage of unwholesome qualities taking hold of the mind. The first way of training in sila, moral conduct, is unable to provide this prevention. The second way possesses confidence of panya, wisdom. It gradually increases the understanding of samadhi, right view, while training in sila, moral conduct. It defends against naive and gullible moral conduct that is referred to as adherence to rules and practices, sila bhatta paramasa. According to the outline of the Eightfold Path, the second way of training in sila, moral conduct, is the most correct. Linking this training with the first way described above is likely to lead to even better results, but solely applying the first way is considered inadequate for true spiritual practice. This is because in correct practice in relation to one's surroundings, one begins with training in moral conduct, but in relation to the mind, one must from the very start reflect on things in order to cultivate wisdom and develop right view, samadhi. Doing this once incorporates yo niso manasikara, wise reflection, which can be applied at all times in one's life. One does not hold back and only apply systematic reflection in times of formal contemplation, or only applying it in the context of moral conduct. Such reflection is equally important when developing concentration and wisdom, samadhi, and the other path factors that thus increasingly proficient and complete. Here one sees the development of path factors that is linked to the practice of the Titso Sika, the threefold training. From an external perspective, or by considering the major stages of practice, one sees the gradual development of according to the Titso Sika, Sila, Samadhi, and Panya, moral conduct, concentration, and wisdom. But when one looks closely at the details of a person's spiritual efforts, one sees the path factors as busily engaged. The person continually walks along the path. To sum all this up, for the practice to be correct from an external perspective, there is an emphasis on the Titso Sika, the threefold training, while inwardly a person walks in line with the path. This may be the external system of training, and the internal development of spiritual factors are well integrated. Taking these considerations into account, if one leaves people to develop spiritually on their own in accord with nature without relying on any social factor for assistance, there will only be a few prodigies who are able to apply yo niso manasikara, wise reflection by themselves, and reach the highest stage of realization. Conversely, if one leaves people to develop solely by the way of social influence and control, will be unable to realize the highest good which is within their potential. Therefore, the following two ways of spiritual development are considered extreme and incorrect. First, development left to unfold on its own naturally and without interference. Secondly, develop following the control and sway of society. Spiritual development left up to nature is inadequate. One must also foster an understanding of natural phenomena which lead to a proper relationship to nature. Equally, spiritual development following the dictates of society is also inadequate. One must also gain a thorough knowledge which allow one to escape from the influence and power of society. A complete development involves an interaction with and an understanding of both nature and society, because people are shaped and influenced both by natural and social forces. Such development is nourished by society and by nature, bringing about prosperity and happiness. If people are to live together in peace, even just two people, there must be boundaries and means to regulate behavior. When people live together, there is necessary for rules or agreements on behavior, or what should be done and what should be avoided, in order to bring about harmony and safety for each individual. Even an individual person has conflict desires, requires self-discipline in order to live well. Take the example of numerous drivers arriving at a junction from different directions. Each person is in a hurry and vies to pass first. It thus gets stuck and no one can advance, causing chaos and dispute. If they are willing to lay down a set of regulations, however, everyone can pass comfortably. Likewise, a community or society requires a set of rules. Apart from the rules, there is a collection of inherent social system, custom, traditions, cultural practices, institutions, and a body of technical knowledge which gives shape to a particular society. These factors shaping society also shape individuals, instilling in them properties that conform with society. At the same time, individual influence, the society, individual people, and society as a whole, thus are interdependent. Nonetheless, when a society has a clearly defined shape and form, it tends to become rigid and inflexible, resulting in one-sided exchange of people being shaped by society in order to meet social needs and expectations. People, however, do not exist solely to oppose society. Society exists to benefit individuals on a fundamental level it has created for increased well-being of people. From this perspective, society is only one supportive factor in people's lives. On its own, it's unable to lead people to a truly virtuous life, because social institutions themselves were created simply to establish a sense of order and discipline. Once people live together in harmony, there is something besides maintaining social integrity, which is incumbent on them to realize. Besides the social institutions, people may pay attention to nature. The most supreme blessing of life is to obtain through an understanding of nature. This is because truth of life is essential, grounded in nature. Society is simply one supportive factor in people's life, which can either help to foster and increase intimacy and knowledge of nature, or it can be the opposite effect and cause an alienation from nature. In any case, even though society may have a clear and strictly defined shape, it is not the only factor influencing people. If people are unable to apply yo-ni-so manasikara, wise reflection, they can escape from the controlling power of society. Yo-ni-so manasikara, reason analysis, enables a person to transcend or to see through society and to realize the underlying timelessness, truth of nature. A person endowed with sound judgment and reason analysis is able to be free from the power of social conditioning, to attain higher levels of virtue, and to return in order to shape society in a fully attentive way. People require a code of conduct in order to live together in harmony. Society thus needs moral code as well as a compatible set of rules for people to follow. It is true that this moral code can simply become a way to limit people's freedom, or it can be even a way by enslaving people to a system of control. If it is simply a set of prohibitions and rules which people observe by blindly following one another, emphasis on blindly following one another, it can lead to other ill effects if it is maintained through coercion or deception, emphasis on dogma. Similarly, actions which are alleged to be free may also be expression of the mind, subject to defilements and suffering, so kalesas and dukkha. In this case, it is simply freedom to give expression to mental bondage, freedom to be a slave, or freedom to allow people to be enslaved. This form of freedom involves enfranchising others in some way or another, directly or indirectly. In contrast, people who are free from the power of mental kalesas, defilements, and who are able to apply wisdom without the obscuring power of social conditioning, do not require prescribed moral standards. They are endowed with an inherent moral discipline. Moreover, they are able to comply with the moral code that they recognize as benefiting other human beings. The important link here is that sila, moral code, is a good thing when it is set down and followed with correct understanding of its objectives. That is, sila, moral code, must be accompanied by samadhi, right view. Therefore, when one is teaching children a moral discipline, one must also engender an understanding of values and necessity of discipline. When laying down rules, regulations, precepts, it is important for participating members to understand their purpose and to give consent, which will prevent them from feeling coerced or ordered about, or from simply blind obedience. Now, note that when laying down the Vinaya rules for a bhikkhu, the Sangha Gautama Buddha would gather the entire community and explain the purpose of each rule, obtaining everyone's acknowledgement and consent. Moreover, he did not use the term as a command, forbid, force, don't, or must. In reference to the causes resembling prohibitions, he used the phrase, monks who acts in such and such a way, commits such and such transgressions of such and such a degree, in reference to a suitable or unsuitable action outside of the patimokkha. At most, he would say, you should not do that. As for the causes resembling orders or commandments, he would use the term anutta, permitted, allowed, or most would say, you should do that. Even in terms of existing social system, custom, traditions, and institutions, it is most important to teach each new generation the values of these things. In addition, people should be taught to understand natural phenomena, to discern the world according to the truth, which will help them to escape from the power or the clutches of social conditioning and to reach higher levels of spiritual excellence, which society is unable to provide. Most importantly, society should act as karanamitra, social friend, or virtuous friend, or at the least be a place in which one can discover such friends in order to help people train in the development of reason analysis, yoniso manasikara, on the subject just mentioned. There is an important difference between nature and society, which should be taught to people from the time they are children. Namely, nature follows general laws of nature, dhamma niyama, whereas human society follows the additional laws of volitional action, kamma niyama. When teaching children, they should be treated with loving kindness. Besides directly showing them kindness in order to foster their well-being, say by making them feel at ease and by promoting long-term mental health, one should also aim to cultivate their faculty of wisdom by leading them to understand the wholesome intentions of goodwill and the commitment to other human beings. This understanding arises by having children draw a comparison between two people, or a comparison between people and nature. If they have a skilled teacher, children will recognize that people are different from nature. Human beings are possessed of consciousness and intention. They're able to volitionally manage and steer their affairs. They're able to deliberately act well or act badly. A mother, for instance, does not raise her children simply by natural instincts. She also possesses the human qualities of love, well-wishing, and kind deliberation. If people treat each other well, this will lead to everyone's happiness and well-being. This is distinct from nature, which is neutral, does not possess, or nature does not possess the faculties of mind. Nature does not think in good or bad ways. Nature is sometimes gentle and favorable to people, giving them satisfaction and joy. At other times, it is violent and destructive, causing pain and suffering. Whichever way it goes, nature is not willful. It does not act out of spite. Nature exists according to its own causes and conditions. In any case, human beings are dependent on nature. We should thus cherish nature and relate to it with an understanding of causality. Human life is normally subjective or subject to be considerable amount of pain due to the unintentional oppressive aspects of nature. We who are endowed with the ability to deliberately choose a course of action should not increase the level of suffering for others. Instead, we should use intention in order to assist others, alleviate their suffering, show kindness and compassion. When showing kindness to children, one should be aware that the kindness does not become from an indulgence of craving. For if one indulges their cravings, children will not develop an appreciation of people's wholesome intention. They will not recognize how these kinds of actions are performed deliberately and intentionally. Moreover, they will fail to understand the contrasting neutrality of nature. Besides failing to nurture loving kindness and a sense of personal responsibility, their indulgence causes further harm to children by allowing unwholesome mind states to breed selfishness, stubbornness, weakness of mind, greed, and envy. The way to avoid such indulgences is to teach children how to know the distinction between kind and loving actions performed by human beings and the causal dynamics inherent in nature. This way, one avoids mistaken expression of loving kindness, which obstruct or impair children's insight into the truth. When educating children, one needs to possess all four of the divine bindings, the Brahma Vihara. Besides firmly grounded in metta, loving kindness, one shows karuna, compassion. When the children is suffering, one acknowledges and rejoices mudita in the children's happiness. Or she or he does something good or acts with sound judgment. One is ecumenides, upeka, or looks on with subjective. With objectivity, while children is acting responsibly for and reasonably, or when the child needs to be accountable for the results of his or her own actions. With the last factor of equanimity in the particular, ensures that loving kindness does not hinder wisdom. Surrounded by natural forces, which are sometimes favorable and sometimes harmful, human lives have no true stability. People must struggle to survive. They must find things to sustain life and escape from and remove hostile elements. When one does not truly understand nature, one attaches and devotes oneself to these things. One hopes will gratify desire. One sees the world as a place for pursuing sense pleasures, a place to fulfill one's desire. One views oneself as ruling over the world. one sees others as obstacles or competitors. This in turn leads to possessiveness, hostility, hatred, contempt, competition, oppression between people. Moreover, when one does not get what one wants or things later change, this gives rise to intense suffering. When one receives encouragement by virtuous friends, someone who helps to see the value of loving kindness, one's relationship towards other people and towards nature improves. This, however, is still right view on a mundane level. If one wishes to develop truly secure understanding, one must also cultivate transcendent right view. This is done by understanding the truth of nature, of life, and the world, namely, all things exist according to causes and conditions. All worldly phenomena, lokiya dhamma, are uncertain, impermanent. They are inherently insubstantial. They are without an essential core, which would make them independent from other phenomena. They cannot be truly controlled. They cannot give essential meaning to life. The human beings are without a self, which is able to truly control everything else, or our lives are subject to the same laws of nature as other people. Humans and other living creatures are all companions in birth, old age, sickness, and death. We all cherish happiness and are averse to suffering. Moreover, all life is dependent on other life in order to exist. This kind of understanding is fundamental even for a child in order to know how to correctly relate to the world and other people. It leads people to change how to give values to things, switching from using craving to using wisdom as means of evaluation. They recognize that this truly valuable in life and worthy of aspiration. They know how to make their minds free and happy. They become more skilled at alleviating suffering. This firmly establishes samadhi, right view, reduces greed, hatred, and delusion, reduces competitive and oppression, reduces moral problems. When right view is established, a person advances towards the goal with support of several other spiritual factors as described in their sutra prasas. Monks, if it is aided by 5 factors, samadhi has liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom as fruit and reward. These 5 factors are virtuous conduct, learning, discussion, calm, insight. To summarize, samadhi, right view, accords with reality. It refers to seeing things as they truly are. The development of right view requires continuous systematic reflection, which prevents seeing things superficially or seeing only the end results of natural phenomena. Systematic reflection helps one inquire closely into things by analyzing the various convergent factors and the sequences of causes and conditions within natural processes. It prevents one from being deceived by things or from becoming a puppet that is propelled, convulsed, and manipulated by sight, sound, smells, tastes, tactile objects, and popular beliefs, leading to personal and social problems. Instead, one is mindful and fully aware, free, self-confident, and able to determine and act with wisdom. That's the end of chapter 16.2. At the bottom of page 1563, Buddha Dhamma.